Hi, I'm Reed, this is Crowland Publishing, and today we are continuing our discussion of campaign hooks. This one, we're talking about exploration campaigns, cartography campaigns, going out into the wilderness, going out and finding specific locations, mapping them and bringing back that information. Now, in the early days of D&D, exploring and mapping were a huge part of what D&D was. It was a whole subgame to actually create maps and to create a virtual space. And you would see players in early editions being told, someone must be a mapper. Now, over time, the technology changed, and that within fairly cheap to produce books, you could have beautiful, complicated maps. Just the technology of desktop publishing changed, and eventually that came to the home users, so the DMs with the correct software could do their own beautiful, complicated, really, really well-keyed maps that you would like to hand to the players and say, look at this beautiful thing, here is the map, here is the game world, so that you didn't have this drive to explore because you knew what was there. It was just a matter of picking where you wanted to go and picking the right way to go there. And exploring is still a lot of fun, and you can still make a good campaign. It's a bit of an old school campaign based around exploring and based around mapping. Now, we used to call these hex crawling games or sandbox games, the idea being that you're in a sandpit and you're just making your own fun up. What you tends to have were hexagonal maps, and they would represent a mile or whatever across, and DMs would either pre-gen those maps or they would have tables ready to procedurally generate them as they went. And so you could either explore the land, you would either have to map a fair amount of territory, or you could zoom in and make the exploration of ancient ruins or caves or other dimensions or anything more of a typical dungeon crawl. It's more of an exploring rather than clearing out and taking the treasure. You want to create maps and get information on these locations. Now, there are other games, there are other RPG games, yes they do exist, that aren't D&D that really specialise in this sort of campaign. You might want to have a look at some of the earlier editions of D&D. Torchbearer is a great OSR style game. One Ring, the Lord of the Rings style game, again, specialises in exploring Lord of the Rings. Maze Rats is great for kid-friendly sort of stuff, and Stars Without Number by my man Kevin Crawford, I talk about him all the time, I love him. That's a space thing, but it will give you a fantastic model for how to do a really, really complicated procedurally generated map. Loads and loads of the OSR style games like Labyrinth Lord or whatever have takes on this sort of game as well. It really was a thing that persisted in D&D well into the 90s. Now, we're a narrative gaming channel. We want to talk about stories primarily, so we have to think of the concept behind why you are mapping, what you are exploring, and why you are exploring it. Are you the scouts for a civilization after an apocalypse? Are you scouts for an invasion of a land? Are you colonists with all the dark side that might suggest? Are you academics doing field research, paleontologists, biologists, zoologists, geologists, archaeologists? Are you a ranger order, hunting down specific kinds of animals? Are you mages and wizards and warlocks looking for the mana fields? Are you priests? Are you a temple looking for the fallen body of a god or a devil or an angel? Are you scouts for just a regular expedition? Maybe you're underwater. Maybe you're on other planes. Maybe you have found a portal to hell and you're about to invade hell or heaven. Now, generally speaking, macro exploring is charting terrain. You are basically unfogging a map. You are looking to create, slowly but surely, a good, reliable knowledge of the terrain of a vast amount of land. Micro exploring is just dungeon crawling. Important to note that both of them have little to no emphasis on combat. So if you're looking to do more than just I stabbed a goblin, this is a great place for DMs to start. But first of all, macro level. My first thoughts would be you need to give something that's geographically bounded, something that they can complete, an island, a peninsula, a stretch of coast, a specific forest. You need to be able to tell your players, okay, here is what you have to explore and here is how you can complete it. That feeling of completion, that feeling of narrative forward motion is very important. Now you need to decide, are they looking for something specific, like a lost city or a lost temple or a lost treasure? Or are they exploring more widely just to see what's going on, or are they looking to sell a quality map? Those were worth a lot of money back in the day, and you could make an adventurer very, very rich. Now, you also need to talk about what kind of land are you exploring? Do you like mountains? Do you like deserts? Do your players like frost and Antarctic stuff? Do they like rivers and lakes and beaches? Jungles? What do you and what do they think is narratively interesting? Because you're going to be expending a lot of time and expending a lot of sort of imaginative resources on thinking about these kinds of environments. Do you want to generate all this procedurally? Or do you as a DM want to plan it out? I like to at least have a few story beats going in. So I might say, okay, well in that hex, that's where the sleeping dragon lives. Or I might say in that hex is a bunch of orcs, but they're very, very friendly orcs. Maybe you're looking to do a lot of trading. Maybe you want to make contact with races that your culture doesn't know very well. Maybe you want to get some Ettercap silk, and then you want to swap that and trade that for Dwarven gold, and swap that Dwarven gold for drow magic. Do you want to negotiate with weird bird people living up a cliff? Do you want to try and make friends and allies of a wild race of Warforged? Making friends is always a fun part of D&D, and it can also make your exploration a whole lot easier, because if you've made friends with those bird people and they can say, look, yeah, we can fly you over the crevasse, or if you make friends with the wild drow who say, no, what you want is actually north, you can make your adventures a whole lot quicker and more effective, and that is going to save you and your party a whole lot of time and a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of resources, because as we'll see in a second, resource management is an important part of exploring games. And as well, being a murder hobo, saying you tell me where the treasure is or I'll kill you, is going to get you a bad reputation. And that's going to affect your overall success as a party. Now, the environmental threats are very important. Make something as simple as darkness and light count, because you don't want to move around in the dark. It's hard to fight in the dark. It's hard to shoot arrows, certainly. Do you have an unlimited amount of torches? No. Do you have an unlimited amount of oil? No. How many potions of cure light wounds do you have? Because the cleric is sometimes not going to be around. How much food do you have? Who can hunt? Who can find water? What happens if those forest halflings you meet have horrible diseases? What if you give the kobolds horrible diseases? Do you have dogs on a sled? Do you have camels in a train in a desert? What if they die? Is it too hot? Are you going to take off your plate mail? Are you going to risk constitution drain? What if your robes are too cold? Can you cast a spell while you're in walrus mittens? Then there's the physical dangers of exploring. My old favourite, for example, is quicksand. But what if you're in a flammable tar pit? What if you're in a sinkhole? What if it's an avalanche or an earthquake? What about if you're caught in a forest fire or a hurricane? What if you're on a boat or a raft and a sudden flood comes? You might want to go and check out those drowning rules that you skipped over in the player's handbook. Maybe you want to look at some fan-made rules and homebrews for survival subsystems. Now, as a DM, no matter how much you'd like to do procedural generation, it's going to pay off if you do some planning in advance. The history of the landmass, the inhabitants, the ecologies, how they relate to each other, any kind of secrets that are going on. Now, like I said, you can procedurally generate it. You can find some random tables. There's loads online. I'm sure there's some in earlier editions of D&D, although I can't remember which is which right now. It's easy enough to do. What kind of environment? Roll that. How dangerous is the environment? Roll that. That sort of stuff. I like to have a sort of special features table that I do. Like, number 1, ruled by demons. Number 2, holy to the war god. Number 3, this land is infested with disease. And so on, that sort of stuff. So that there's always something interesting to do. So that you've always got at least the bare bones of an adventure. Now, sooner or later, though, that macro-level exploring is going to shrink down to micro-level exploring, just because they're going to find what they were looking for. And that means that your emphasis goes from exploring terrains and landscapes towards a bound geographical location. The RPG word for that is dungeon. Micro-exploration is just a dungeon with some specific needs. Primarily, it needs to be big. It is the centerpiece of the campaign. You're going to need a lot of interesting rooms. You're going to need a lot of rooms because there's not going to be all that much combat, so it's going to go through pretty quickly. Now, you need to get your Legend of Zelda on. You need to think about a lot of great and interesting traps and puzzles and riddles and all that sort of stuff. This is where the right brain problem-solving kind of players really, really shine. This is what they love. Now, you need to read any of the dozens of books on traps and trap designs and puzzles for DMs that are out there. It is a whole sort of sub-area of the hobby. I have ad-libbed a whole session based solely on some puzzles from a Soul Reaver game, but you will find that you are rewarded if you really take some time to plot these things out, because players who want to do exploring really want to do the, wait, if we move all the statues to the east side, but we move all the maggots to the right side, that will mean that we've solved this equation, and the algebra is, and they love that sort of stuff. Now, honestly, DMing is not that hard. You don't really need to buy a book or anything like that. But for a first-timer, this level of attention to detail and, extreme preparedness can be a little bit much. So I would recommend that you at least get one famous and well-regarded dungeon module and have a read through that, and you can either run that or just grab 2 or 3 and just mash them all together. I like Storm of King's Thunder for 5e. That has some cool locations and dungeons. Old school, first edition, Vaults of the Drow. It's a classic for a reason. I always like Sunless Citadel from 3rd edition with the Golthias tree and the moon calf and all that sort of stuff. Deep Carbon Observatory, it's not perfect, but at least has an interesting map. Now, I've been doing this for a long time. I haven't played an official Wizards of the Coast or sort of any official adventure module aside from just stealing the map for a very, very long time, so I'm not the best person to recommend, but there are loads and loads of discussions online about what were the best maps, the best locations, the best mega dungeons. Have a read through and decide what you like best and what your budget is for buying these things, and at the very least just have a read to see how other people have done it, because it is a lot of prep work. Now, the last thing that we should talk about really is how you can set the dials narratively, because any kind of subgenre of fantasy can be an exploratory fantasy. Say you want to do a Mad Max in fantasy world, post-apocalyptic, so it's all about you going into the wastes of the Iron Sands and fighting off the water mutants. Easy to do. You want to do a horror fantasy. Perhaps there was an undead apocalypse once and now the dark shadows dwell in the cold places of the world, and that's you going to find them and scout them out and find what's left of the angel army. Perhaps it's optimistic and you are finding and reuniting communities all across a once shattered and destroyed landscape. So you can set those different modes of the narrative to how you like, to what are your reasons for adventuring, and what are the results of the adventuring as well. Have you changed the world? Have you made it better? Have you seen off a great evil? Or have you just made yourself a lot of money and damn the stupid natives? This is the art of narrative DMing. What kind of story ultimately are you telling through the medium of the exploratory campaign? So I think we've got a few minutes left, so let's have a look at how we would put this all together. So say that you decide that you want your players to, check out the City of the Lizard People. So we tend to flavor lizard people as South American or Central American themed because that's how our cultural imagination views heat and jungles and all that sort of stuff. Maybe Sub-Saharan Africa, and that's what we think about when we think about big lizards. Maybe far northern Queensland and Australia where there is real big goannas and stuff. So first you knock together, say, 25 hexes, 25 miles square. And you put the City of the Lizard People, which is the ultimate goal of the campaign. You either randomly generate it or you just go there, right in the middle, or there, right at the top. Somewhere that's hard to get to because you don't want your players to have to work to get there. So then you nominate some hexes for some specific kind of goals. So say, okay, well, those are friendly frog people. Okay, in that hex over there to the northwest, neutral snake people. So say that then you go, okay, well, hex there, and that hex, that is the hunting ground of a huge pack of Tyrannosauruses. And that hex over there, that is where the great blue dragon hunts. Then you want to make a lot of natural hazards, sinkholes, dust storms. Maybe you want to have randomly generated weather so that your players need to have to, be prepared to dig down to get to safety or to somehow stay out of this wind that will strip them to the bone. Then, eventually, they're going to get to the actual city itself. That is when we shrink down our focus from macro level exploration to micro level exploration. And then eventually you get to the City of the Lizard People and you discover that it is in fact a sacred city. It's not very heavily occupied. Who is there tends to be lizard holy people, seers, prophets, things like that. This is a place where the holy dead reside and is a place where they commune with their lizard gods. So that you go through, you find whatever you were looking for in there. You find the sacred treasure of the lizard people, you find the diamond of the sun, whatever. But then when you're there, the big shocking revelation, because this is a narrative game, you need to go forward to the next level of the campaign. You discover that, oh my god, the dragon gods of the lizards are coming back, and these are dragons like no one has ever seen. Now you must quickly retrace your steps throughout this desert wilderness and get back to your land. And that, I think, will make a pretty interesting exploring campaign. So I think that we've reached the end, and hopefully that will get you interested in starting an exploring campaign or give you some clues on where to begin. I certainly like them. I like the emphasis on being smart. I like the emphasis on working together. I certainly like that it's a change from hacking and slashing and combat, because sometimes you just get sick and tired of stabbing golems, right? So what about you? Have you done exploring games? Or are you from an older generation when it was just the normal thing to do? Can you hear those parrots outside my window? Australia. But anyway, tell me in the comments. I'm Reed. This is Crayland Publishing. See you later.